Good afternoon to everyone. We are now convened into the E.O.T.C. meeting, and I see many wonderful faces. I wish you were all here in person. It's been a long time since we've all been together. So with that said, we've got a pretty tight agenda, and what's very important, we have several people that need to leave by 5:30 who are here and attending from Aspen. Alyssa's still up in Maine, so she will not be attending. And with that said, I'm going to jump right into the agenda. The first item on the agenda is public comment. Do I have anyone that would like to make a public comment? Come on up.
Thank you.
We're over here, over by Clint.
Over here? Hi, everyone. It is really great to see everyone, and I think you're probably aware Governor Polis just about 20 minutes made it mandatory. We all have to wear masks while we're waiting for the buses even. And just usually when I come up, I always give you a little traffic update, but the traffic was backed up from your fire station all the way to Highline.
Yeah, we got a little construction going on. I think we solved the problem just about 3 minutes ago.
Okay, that sounds great. I was like, am I going to make it? So really quickly, I just wanted to say thank you very much. The last time that I spoke was trying to do it virtually, and I was not very successful at it. And David and I tried to put together a little slideshow on a request for $40,000 from the E.O.T.C. or each individual jurisdiction to take a look at studying an aerial connection, not building it, but just studying it. So I just wanted to put that back on the table. And then the second question that I have is, we have a lot of safety issues on Highway 82. As you know, we just had that fatality down in Basalt within Picken County. And I was wondering if it's within the jurisdiction of the Regional Transportation Director for those concerns to be processed through CDOT. I know that the mission statement for the E.O.T.C. is mass transit, but with the highways just being so crazy as they are right now and the traffic, so I didn't know if David needed an assistant to help him if he had a little bit more of a workload, but I just wanted to know what the best process is to do that.
Well, quite frankly, I don't have an answer for that.
Okay.
So that's going to have to go into the parking lot.
Okay.
Okay. Then,
just so we can park it there.
Yeah.
That'd be great. And then also, reading through the packet today, it basically looks like there might be a little change where I think, if I remember correctly, if someone wanted to get something done, they would come to the E.O.T.C. and then it would go back to each individual jurisdiction. Are we now going to each individual jurisdiction and then back to E.O.T.C., or is it both methods?
Well, I think it's up for discussion as part of the strategic plan.
Perfect.
At some point, okay?
Okay.
Right now, that's the way it is. You go back to each, and that's budget issues.
And for the strategic plan, we adopted it differently because there was a large level of agreement. So rather than talking about it again tonight, it's adopted and going forward.
Yes, and we just signed our resolution on that. So.
Okay.
And since it's 4 after 4, I'm going to have to
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I just got my comments in. Thank you.
Thank you. And David, we're going to make you the presenter, and you want to start through. Well, we have committee updates. Do we have anyone with a quick community update? Because I want to get going right into the strategic plan, and perhaps we push the updates to the very end. I'm going to look for consensus. All of you. Greg, did you have anything you wanted to say? Or you find to push it?
Only briefly, I sent a chat. Hopefully you have an ADB person there. The audio coming to me is almost unintelligible. It's over-modulating coming from Snowmass Village from your microphones in the room there. So if there's any way you can reduce the output volume, we might be able to hear
Doug's
you
on it.
A lot better.
We're working on it right now.
That's it. Excellent. Thanks.
Okay, I don't see any other hands. So Dave?
All right, let me see if I can get share my screen here.
We might have a lower volume in this room. Hopefully you can all hear each other in this room. You said it's better.
Okay. Yeah. So you guys can all hear me okay now? I don't want to keep going if you can't understand me.
Yep.
All right, awesome. So before we jump in, I did want to run through, as we normally do, a reminder of the mission statement and state statute. We do have an updated mission statement. This mission statement now reads that the EOTC is to work collectively to reduce and manage the volume of vehicles on the road and parking system and continue to develop and support a comprehensive multimodal long-range strategy that will ensure a convenient, equitable, and efficient transportation system for the Roaring Fork Valley. And then as a reminder of the state statute and voter requirements, the EOTC is required to expend time and funding on financing, constructing, operating, and managing the mass transportation system within the Roaring Fork Valley. We've covered a couple of the items on the agenda already today, including public comment and committee member updates. Number 3 here, this was time set aside to review the strategic plan if necessary. As leading up to this meeting, as part of the prep meetings, you may all recall that you voted in favor of the strategic plan as proposed. So each jurisdiction did vote unanimously to adopt the strategic plan as it was proposed. So we don't need to go through that here today, and we can move right into number 4. So we do have a new, and the EOTC's first strategic plan is currently adopted. I do believe that, I know that Marky saw her resolution of approval for signature, and I believe that Tori, you should be seeing yours here shortly if you haven't already, and then the Pickens County should be seeing theirs on second reading next week on the 22nd.
Good.
So again, the strategic plan is adopted, does outline a new mission statement. It identifies a vision statement as well as guiding principles and key strategies. So just wanted to hallmark this as a key moment for the EOTC moving forward, and we'll continue to utilize this plan in all our decisions going forward from this point. And I'd like to move into the comprehensive Valley Transportation Plan. For time's sake and just for consistency, I'd like to ask everybody to keep track of your questions as I go through the presentation. I'll try to do it at a reasonable speed, but keep it moving along and ask those questions at the end. So with the CVTP, we went over this a little bit in the prep meetings, but I'll go over the highlights here. The CVTP does build off the strategic plan as well as the feedback from the EOTC retreat. It's intended to identify those policy level priorities. So it's intended to not necessarily get into the nitty-gritty of, say, a specific sidewalk connection or curb ramp, but policy level items that can be extended out over the coming years. So it is intended to be used as a guide document for the EOTC and staff expenditure of time and money. And then looking at the funnel, this does take us to the second rung down, again, identifying our policy level priorities based on the strategic plan and input from the retreat. This is a view of the current CVTP. This was adopted in 1993 and hasn't been updated since 1993, so it is currently still the EOTC's plan. Looking at some of the qualities of the current CVTP, it is anticipated to be updated periodically, and the IGA that it's attached to does address that. It is attached to the current EOTC IGA, so that is something that we might want to talk about moving forward as we review the IGA next year in terms of whether we would want to maintain this plan connected to that IGA or keep it or have it split off as a separate document. The CVTP does identify the geographic area for the sales and use tax expenditure. This geographic area comes from ballot language, and it identifies the Roaring Fork Valley. The plan itself is a simple one-page representation of the policy level priorities for the EOTC for expenditures of time and money. So it's not a large document by any means. It's intended to be easily digestible and fairly simple. We do have a few changes, and I'll go through these in more detail in the next few slides. But some of the highlight changes I did add, and staff did add an explanation of the CVTP, and this explanation was added to allow the document to stand on its own if we do choose to separate it off from the IGA later on in time. Secondly, it does remove the transit service from Owl Creek Road, and it adds a policy priority for the Upper Valley to maintain contiguity of service between Snowmass Village and the main line on Highway 82. So over time, the Owl Creek Road has not been utilized for transit service, and this change is anticipated to reflect the progress of the plan in transit service in the valley up to this point. And then thirdly, categorizes priorities in two simplified topics. So one being regional and one being Upper Valley. And it does also remove the Snowmass Village and Aspen detail. So within each of the municipalities, it takes those out and it shifts the direction a little bit more from looking within the municipalities to looking between the municipalities and those hubs, which is really more the focus of the E.O.T.C. And it's my opinion, at least, that over the last 27 years since the E.O.T.C., I don't know what happened there. Since the E.O.T.C. was first adopted, that the town of Snowmass Village, as well as the city of Aspen, have made significant progress in terms of institutionalizing transportation and transit service within each of the municipalities that goes beyond what was originally anticipated within the CVTP from '93. It also removes accomplished goals and maintains ongoing priorities. So this is an anticipation that this plan is to be a forward-looking plan and isn't anticipated to be necessarily a historical document and looking back in time. That is really part of what's documented within the strategic plan, and that documents that history and what has been accomplished. That said, it does maintain the priorities that have not yet been accomplished from 1993. So this is looking at the proposed, there it goes, the proposed Comprehensive Valley Transportation Plan. Made it to scale for the valley, so this is a GIS document. And then looking at the components that have been added. So this is the short explanation. It's got very quickly, it identifies the historical origins, the current purpose, as well as identifies that the plan is to be updated periodically. The real meat of the plan is within the 5 regional and Upper Valley priorities on the left-hand side. The visionary priority, this is a good example of something carried forward from the 1993 plan, and this is a dedicated transit line between Glenwood Springs, Aspen, and Snowmass Village. So one small change that was made to this is in '93 it identified it as a rail line, updated it to a transit line in anticipation that we could see different types of service over time and didn't necessarily want to be pinpointed to rail at this point. And then we've got roadway conditions. This is also a component that was carried forward from '93, and for the most part, these have all been accomplished, and so it's identifying existing roadway conditions at this point. In '93, they were more in anticipation of what those roadway conditions could be. I would state that the one exception that has not yet been completed is the entrance to Aspen. So between the Maroon Creek Roundabout and 7th Street and Aspen, you'll see on here that the airport to Aspen section, I don't know if I can get a cursor, I can't. This section is identified as a 2-lane highway with 2-lane dedicated transit way. Currently, we've got the 2-lane dedicated transit way between the airport and Maroon Creek Roundabout and then between 7th Street into Aspen, but we are missing that section between the Maroon Creek Roundabout and 7th Street. And within the roadway conditions, it's not anticipated to necessarily get down to that level of detail. And then the discussion regarding the entrance to Aspen is then identified in an Upper Valley priority. So I believe it is bullet number 3 in the Upper Valley priorities, which I'll go through here in a moment, identifies a multimodal solution to the entrance to Aspen. So stating that we need to continue that forward. At this point, the record of decision is in place, it is law, and it does identify a 2-lane highway with 2-lane dedicated transit way. Which is why that isn't specifically identified here in the roadway conditions. So running through the regional priorities, So it takes a minute to change on, on that screen. Regional priorities, so we've got 5 of them. First one is park and ride lot improvements. And this is a long-standing priority for the EOTC. You just have to look to the Brush Creek Park and Ride to see evidence of that. And these are basically essential components to the transit system. But this priority does identify that we can look at park and rides all up and down the valley between Glenwood Springs, as well as up to Snowmass Village and Aspen. The second bullet is first and last mile solutions, and this includes everything from bicycle and pedestrian connections, as well as bike share, ride hailing, and integrated transportation. And what's intended by integrated transportation is essentially mobility as a service. So moving to more of that technology platform where you could potentially use one app or one program to be able to schedule both, say, a bike share ride to a park and ride, to a bus, to, say, car share on the other end. So it's trying to integrate all of those components. So that is considered as part of the first and last mile solutions, and it's not just infrastructure that's intended there, or hard infrastructure, I should say. The third bullet is transit speed, accessibility, reliability, and efficiency enhancements. Say this is the part of the core purpose for the E.O.T.C, and it's really looking at that mainline transit between Glenwood Springs, Snowmass Village, and Aspen. And how do we continue to improve the reliability, speed, accessibility, and efficiency of that service to make it as competitive, if not more competitive, than the private automobile in order to try to lure people to transit and hence reducing congestion and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The fourth bullet here, we have congestion reduction measures. This is also a long-standing component to the E.O.T.C. It goes back to 1998 record of decision and controlling vehicle numbers going across the Castle Creek Bridge. But the term congestion reduction measures really comes from the Upper Valley Mobility Report, which is the Aspen Institute Task Force on Transportation Mobility that finished in 2017. And this is anticipated to look at anything that can reduce the number of vehicles on the roadway. And this includes things like that are specifically identified in the Upper Valley Mobility Report, including congestion pricing and dynamic dynamic parking pricing. The fifth one here, we have technologies and innovation to encourage mode shift. This is fairly self-explanatory. It's looking at technologies that can help encourage that mode shift. So everything that's, think big technologies, rail, maglev, those type of, I guess, grandiose ones, to more utilitarian technologies that can be used for, say, HOV lane enforcement or dynamic parking pricing or congestion pricing. So it's intended to cover the range of technologies that can encourage that mode shift. And moving on to the Upper Valley priorities, these tie back significantly to the regional priorities, which are more generalized. The Upper Valley priorities are anticipated to focus more on the Upper Valley, meaning, and by Upper Valley I mean within Pitkin County. And really, because this is the area where, one, the tax is collected, so we do have a responsibility to the residents where this tax is collected, as well as this is also where we have jurisdiction. So we have more leeway to do things here than, say, initiating a project in Garfield County or Eagle County. So that's the purpose for narrowing this down into the Upper Valley priorities and regional priorities. Again, we've got 5 main priorities. First one is bicycle and pedestrian connections, transit stops, as well as Brush Creek Park and Ride. So something that came up a lot within the E.O.T.C. retreat and just the time that I've been here is issues connecting bicycles and pedestrians to transit stops, particularly along Highway 82. And then Brush Creek Park and Ride keeps coming up in terms of bicycle and pedestrian connections to the Rio Grande Trail. So I separated that one out in particular because that is a high dollar item. And it's also one that we would need to be committed to moving forward, trying to bridge that gap over to the Rio Grande Trail. So we do also, coming up in October, you will be asked for some matching funds. So I applied for a CDOT grant, was successful in getting a 50% match grant to look at bicycle and pedestrian connections between the airport service road up to the Maroon Creek roundabout. So the most difficult stretch of that. So the matching funds we'd be looking at as a 2021 project to analyze that section to try to figure out which infrastructure projects would be provide us the most bang for the buck. So there is some progress moving forward on that currently. The second bullet point here is the airport multimodal transit hub and transit circulation enhancements. This is anticipated to elevate well, maybe not elevate's not the right word, but to include the Airport Vision Committee's recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners regarding the redevelopment of the airport. And so including the airport as a multimodal hub is actually consistent with the 1993 plan and is consistent with the recommendation that was presented to the Board of County Commissioners. And keep in mind, this is one amongst many recommendations that was a part of that vision. And then transit circulation enhancements includes transit circulation between the airport and Snowmass Village and the airport and Aspen. The third bullet point is looking at multimodal solutions to the entrance to Aspen. So hit on this a little bit earlier on in acknowledgement that through the E.O.T.C retreat and again through just my time working in this position, that while we have a record of decision that was approved by the Federal Highways in 1998, that decision is law. We don't necessarily have consensus around moving forward with that at this time. So this policy is intended to acknowledge and say should be one of our priorities to try to find that consensus ground to decide, do we want to continue with what we currently have in law with the record of decision, or do we want to try to amend what we have? Because currently nothing has been built between the Maroon Creek roundabout and 7th Street in Aspen. So this bullet is intended to address that entrance to Aspen issue. The fourth bullet point here is the Snowmass Village to Brush Creek Park and Ride service commensurate with Highway 82 corridor service. Again, while this is a mouthful, it's intended to really elevate Brush Creek Road to identify it as being a part of the mainline portion of service between Glenwood Springs, Aspen, and Snowmass Village. So all of that would be the main line. And not looking at the Brush Creek Road section as necessarily being a connection or a spur off of the main line. So it's intended to elevate that section and maintain Snowmass Village within that primary system moving forward. And again, progress has been made with that, with the 15-minute service that E.O.T.C funded and is currently still moving forward and is being funded by the ballot measure 7A starting last year. So that commensurate service is still moving forward with BRT service at this point. And then the final one is electrification of the transit system. Again, E.O.T.C made strides with RAFTA moving toward electrification in 2019 with the purchase of a number of electric buses. This priority broadens that out to say everything that we're doing moving forward should be moving toward that electrification in order to help promote climate action goals, as well as limiting impacts on property owners, residents, as well as health impacts from the burning of fossil fuels. And just two last items I'd like to point out here. The roadway conditions, which we talked about earlier. It does identify Highway 82, Brush Creek Road, Owl Creek Road, and Maroon Creek Road up to Highlands, and the ideal roadway configurations within each of those. The one change, again, is with Owl Creek Road. In 1993, within that plan, it's identified as being a HOV-only road with a separated dedicated transit way. So over time, and it's my understanding, again, there's not a lot of documentation that I found on this, but it's my understanding that in the early 2000s that a decision was made, might have even been earlier than that, not to move forward with transit service on Owl Creek Road and to shift it over to Brush Creek Road. So this acknowledges that change. And again, adds the priority for the commensurate service between Snowmass Village and Brush Creek Park and Ride. And then lastly, we've got the future transit line between Glenwood Springs and Aspen and Snowmass Village. The BRT service was a notable step in progressing towards this with queue jumps along Highway 82 and prioritized signalization. But I don't believe that we've fully realized a dedicated transit line between Glenwood Springs, Aspen, and Snowmass Village. So that remains on the plan more as a future visionary priority, I would say. And then I did want to note a few of the comments that I heard going through the prep meetings, just to acknowledge these and provide you with a staff response at this point. The first one looks at the inclusion of the AABC in with the Upper Valley priority for the airport, and including the airport and AABC as a multimodal transit hub, and looking at transit circulation in and out of that whole area. So broadening it out from just the airport to include the AABC and airport. On the staff level, don't necessarily see an issue with that. I think that's probably a good suggestion to look at that as a whole. The second bullet point here looks at the 1998 record of decision, and specifically with roadway conditions. I would note that the arrow placement on the map does look like it points directly at the S-curves. So it wasn't intended to be addressing the S-curves specifically and that entrance to Aspen, but that stretch of road between the airport and Aspen proper. So I think realigning that arrow can eliminate some of that confusion. And then there was also a suggestion to possibly identify the 1998 record of decision within those roadway conditions. I think there is a way to do it. I think we would need to asterisk it, noting that it isn't a roadway condition now, but we do have this record of decision in place, is basically the way I would see that happening. And then the last bullet point here is identifying projects that have been completed from the 1993 Comprehensive Valley Transportation Plan. And as I mentioned before, the CVTP is anticipated to be a forward-looking document, which is part of the reason didn't include that and simply dropped them off of that plan. In addition, the strategic plan is intended to be that historical document and look back and identify those projects. So for those reasons, it wasn't included. Not to say that it can't be or necessarily shouldn't be, but those were the reasons it wasn't. And I did want to point back to, this is the page from the strategic plan that does identify the list of projects, primary projects that the EOTC has completed over the years. And it does include a number of them that came from the 1993 CVTP. And then finally, I just want to point out this final chart. I understand it's not legible, but I think I can walk everyone through it. On the left side here, oh, I do have a cursor now. On the left side here, we have the criteria from the Comprehensive Valley, or from the strategic plan. So this includes the mission, the vision, the 3 guiding principles, and the 3 key strategies. The middle column here is the description that you'll find within the strategic plan. And then this shows that intersection between the regional priorities, the 5 regional priorities, and the 5 Upper Valley priorities. And based on on a surface look, do we believe that we can meet, say, the mission statement, the vision statement, the guiding principles and key strategies with each of these priorities? And as you'll see, most of them have check marks next to them, which is a good thing. That's what you want to see moving forward. But I do want to point out that there are a couple explanations. Whoa. Not too sure what's happening. There are a couple explanations here. One is with congestion reduction measures, and the other is with technologies and innovation to encourage mode shift where they intersect with social sustainability. And it's my opinion that particularly with equity, it really depends on the specific project that comes forward, because congestion reduction measures and technologies can have potential adverse impacts to particularly equity. So I identified these as it needs to be examined at the time of project scoping. So not that they can't meet it, but that we would need to examine them at the time that we have a project at hand. And then at the bottom, you'll see that there are all of these having to do with communication and intergovernmental engagement that really occurs where we've got a project moving forward and we're working toward implementing a specific project. So with that, I'd like to open it up to questions. I am hoping that we might be able to come to an agreement, possibly a list of edits and a vote to move this forward here this afternoon. Again, we do have a couple members that need to leave at 5:30, so we'd like to try to move it along as best as we can.
So questions? Yeah, I see Steve Childs.
And Tori too.
Hi, David, I mean, the whole plan looks really good to me. The one thing I did note when you were just going through it now, it had to do with the congestion reduction on the regional level. It says we want to decrease the number of vehicles on the roads and in the parking structures throughout the valley. And I would take exception to reducing the number of vehicles in the parking on the down valley parts of the whole system. We do want to reduce the number of cars going into Aspen or going into Snowmass Village. One way to do that is to increase the number of people using the down valley park and rides and catching the bus. So I think I would differentiate between the parking in the upper valley, which we want to decrease it in Aspen and in Snowmass Village. We want to increase the parking, the Brush Creek park and ride, and every park and ride all the way down the valley should see an increased number of vehicles. Now, if the park and rides are totally full and people can't park their car there, that's a disincentive to ride the bus, because they get there, there's no place to park their car. They're going to just start heading up the valley. So that is an issue that needs to be dealt with by increasing the amount of parking or increasing the amount of shuttle service from the center of the towns to the park and ride facilities. So that is one change, the one change that I would make. Thank you.
Okay. Tori?
No, thank you. I'll hold comment.
Skippy had his hand up.
Skippy, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Steve, I appreciate your comment, and I definitely can hear and see that we do not want to inhibit people from using those lots and thus encouraging the use of the program, and that our primary traffic right now is in the Upper Valley. However, I don't think that distinction is necessary, because regardless of where you are driving from or to, taking cars off the road in place of public transit is more friendly for our environment. It's more friendly for CO2. Frankly, it's more friendly for driver and reclaim time and congestion. And while the condition right now may be more traffic up valley, we don't want to be encouraging more traffic down valley either. And so I think that the language, the way it's presented, provides the priority of getting people to drive less for all those reasons, but in no way, requires them to. So I think it's actually encouraging helpful behavior valley-wide the way it's currently structured.
It's hard to, the dictation's very hard to follow here. And Rachel, I see your hand up as well, because I was going to make a comment back to Skippy and to Steve, because I do see Dan Blankenship and Dave Johnson. who might be able to provide information on what we see in terms of parking load in some of those down valley. Rachel, go ahead.
Thank you. I'll let the experts talk about the need to expand park and ride lots. I'm sure over time we will need to do so.
Yeah.
We're not able to control the private sector and the growth of all the private property. But what I wanted to just respond quickly is that Down Valley has very serious traffic problems as well. There's a reason why they joined the RTA, and their public voted to join the RTA, and communities even on the I-70 corridor. If you go through Glenwood in the evenings coming up Valley, you'll see traffic backed up very, very significantly, trying to get through Main Street to I-70, to go to Rifle, to go to Silt, to go to the other communities. So, just from the past campaigns, we were arm in arm, as they are on the RAFTA board, with Glenwood Springs, knowing we need to deal with congestion management across the whole valley. So we focus as EOTC with our dollars on Upper Valley, and then through RAFTA, we focus on the full valley. But I just was going to comment, they have serious traffic concerns as well. Thank you.
And we do have traffic counts down at Thunder River Market and also around our roundabout. Dave, do you have any information on what we're seeing on traffic counts? Or is it David Johnson?
Well, so
either one.
Yeah, I don't have specific updates on, I haven't looked at it recently, but I do know that CDOT has traffic counters down there, yeah.
Yeah, so it's always interesting to look at that data. David, do you have any information, David Johnson?
I don't have any information on traffic counts at Thunder River Market, but I could certainly find that out as well.
Okay, let's moving on. Other questions? I can't see everybody. I don't see anyone raising their hand. Did you have some specific questions you really want answered?
I don't necessarily have specific questions I want looking to have answered. Really looking for feedback on the CVTP as is proposed, and see if we can get to a point where does this look like a good plan to you? Does it look like it addresses what you need to see in such a plan?
Okay, I'm going to look around. Skippy's got a thumbs up. Tom's got a thumbs up. Yeah, we've got consensus here. And I will tell you, David, I think it's a phenomenal document. And to get everything done pretty much in one page is, God bless you.
Would you accept a motion?
Is that you? Who made the motion? Ann?
Rachel.
Yeah, that was Rachel. I was going to, but I'd give it to Ann if she's ready.
She could do a second.
Okay, I would make a motion to approve the strategic plan, the Comprehensive Valley Transportation Strategic Plan as presented today.
Okay. Ann?
She was muted.
She was muted. So I'm going to assume that was watching her lips. You're muted, Ann.
Her audio is actually off.
Oh, her audio is off.
I'll second Rachel's motion.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, we have a motion on the table. We do have a second. And I'm not going to do a roll call because that takes way too much time. Can you just raise your right hand if you're all in agreement, or thumbs up? Okay, looking good. Okay, that's approved. So congratulations.
Okay.
Okay, now next part of the discussion.
That is the bulk of the discussion.
That is the bulk of the discussion.
We do have a few minutes, I guess, if anybody has any comments or about the updates that were in the packet, I think we can take those. We did provide time at the prep meetings to do that as well. So I believe that we had most of those answered, but.
Well, there was one area that page 53 of 53 has really, and your discussion within the body of the document, talking about money. I think it might, sorry folks, needless to say, anytime I see negatives, I have a little knee jerk. So I think it might be wise that the listening public really needs to know where we are and what's going on as a result of COVID, and then the whole issue, not COVID per se in terms of the disease, but just the entire impact. We've got an economic impact, not only to the sales and use tax, but also the impacts of COVID on our economy. So why don't we spend a few minutes on the sales and use and where we are with working with RAFTA for this next fiscal year.
Right. So looking at the EOTC budget moving forward, it's a moving target right now, as it is, as you all know, working with your finance departments. So these numbers are as of, I guess, about 60 days ago or so. So things have continued to evolve since then. But these are still the most current numbers that I have. So right now, looking forward to 2021, EOTC is looking at about a 30% reduction in annual revenues. So that's a reduction. So if you go back to 2019, EOTC brought in a total revenue of about $3 million. That's looking to come down to about $1.8, $1.9 million annually. So it's a significant reduction in overall revenues. The biggest hit is still anticipated to be use tax. So that's still looking to be about a 63% reduction. And that stays consistent from what you saw in the 2019 budget coming forward for 2020. So that is still in place. However, the sales tax that was looking to be a -2% is now looking to be about -17, which really hit the EOTC budget and brought it down, I believe, from about down about 22% to down about 30%. So it's not looking great right now. Running all of the numbers, even for the most, I guess, pessimistic scenarios that I have in front of me, we're still able to meet all of our ongoing operational expenses, and that includes the no-fare service, so covering the no-fare service between Aspen, Snowmass, and Brush Creek Park and Ride. That includes funding X Games, that includes WeCycle. So all of those are in there, and we're still managing to meet those obligations, as well as all out-year obligations. So including the obligation for the Snowmass Transit Center, as well as the improvements to the Brush Creek Park and Ride. So while it is a reduction, we're not in a crazy mode yet. We're still okay at this point. So like I said, the numbers are still shifting around. Going to be looking at them again here in the next month with the finance folks, and we'll be really diving into them come October.
So if, just a question for you, as you project into 2021, did you go for the entire year of 2021?
That was out through, budgeting out through 2024 right now.
2024, okay.
Yeah.
And we're able to meet all the financial obligations through, what did you say?
So right now we're able to meet all of the infrastructure obligations through 2024.
Okay.
In addition to the operational expenses for 2021.
Okay. Because those operational expenses are very, very important, because, you know, if there's a delay on the vaccine, and we have another surge, I mean, worst case scenario. So I think all of us need to have our antenna up going forward through the operational issues this next year.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, Steve?
I just wanted to give a quick report on the sales tax revenue in Picking County for May was actually up a few points from May a year ago. And the same thing is happening in some of the other mountain counties in Colorado. They're seeing an increase in sales tax revenue. Now, I realize that the use tax is down and it's not going to come back for the use for the EOTC, but it is encouraging that the sales tax revenue is actually fairly robust, and It might be because so many people are doing online shopping and we're getting some of that sales tax revenue back. So I think that makes the budget shortfall look a little bit better than we had anticipated. We're still in a dire situation, really, when, if we do get the second surge and businesses are shut down especially during the winter season, that would be really hard to overcome. But there is a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, that it might not be as bad economically as we had thought.
Well, I think we are all seeing all the traffic and a lot of tourists in town. I think Limelight and Viceroy here in Snowmass, almost every light was on last night in those hotels. So, and I know Aspen is also seeing the pickup. And that's all good right now for our sales tax and for tourists and what have you. Let's just hope that we keep a pedal to the metal on mask wearing and really focus now, because it's not a good scene right now. And Greg, thank you for chairing the community meeting today. Very well done. So some very positive but also very concerning issues in Garfield, Eagle County, and of course we're seeing a surge here in Pickett County. So with that said, any other observations, comments? Steve, thank you for being positive. Thank you. Tori.
Just if we're taking just new questions, I was wondering if somebody from RAFTA board or RAFTA could just touch on how it's going with RAFTA. I know that as the pandemic settled into our valley and we made those transit changes, for example, limited occupancy, which has now been increased a little bit. We were having buses trail other buses. I never heard kind of a follow-up on how we're doing there. And I don't know, of course, Ann is our representative. So even if Ann wanted to share, but I just 2 minutes on how RAFT is doing. What are we seeing with ridership?
Well, I see Dan Blankenship just turned on his video. And Dan, why don't you tell us a little bit about where we are? And second part of the question is, we're running Maroon Creek and up to Maroon Bells Shadow as well. And what are you seeing there, and what's happening right now within the RAFTA?
Well, thank you, Marky, and hello, all of the EOTC members. It's a pleasure to see everybody. I'll take the first question first. We began operating our Phase 5 plan, I believe it was on May 28th. And, that seems like 6 months ago, to be honest with you. So much gets crammed into a day nowadays that, we lose all track of time. But what we did was we added in about 50 more BRT trips during the day and 4 more local bus trips in the Highway 82 corridor. And our hope was that having that additional frequency would spread the demand over the course of the day so that it would reduce the need to back up buses as extensively as we've been doing while operating Phase 4. And what we've seen is that ridership has increased. I think I was looking at a chart that we had yesterday on our regional services by about 150% on average per day compared to the average ridership during Phase 4. And so we're still backing up a lot of buses because we are maintaining the capacity limit to 15 passengers per bus. And so when you think about having a bus that has 35 seats on it, or an over-the-road coach that has 55 seats on it, and you're only transporting 15 passengers, you need to have twice as many to 3 times as many buses to transport the same number of people, and it requires, more bus operators too. So we're using more buses to haul roughly maybe 40% of the passengers or 50% of the passengers that we would normally be transporting this time of the year. And because of that, we're really kind of reaching the end of our capacity to do a whole lot more right now. We are beginning the process of ramping up to begin hiring bus operators, ideally people that could come to us with a commercial driver's license already, so that we don't have to train them to get their CDL. But then we need to also, get them physicals and drug tests, and then and provide them training on our system and routes and so forth. And so we're thinking that's about a month-long process. If they come to us with a CDL, if they don't have one, that could take another couple of weeks. And we're kind of projecting down the road for the winter season, because if we're at our limit now, that is only going to be more challenging for us in the wintertime when we need to potentially add in some skier shuttles. We're meeting with ski company next week to talk about our capacity and our capabilities and what they're thinking the winter season might look like. And we're also, reviewing our fleet management plan to see how many buses we have available. We are getting 5 more new buses in November or December, and then we're expecting to get somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 or 16 more delivered in the first quarter of 2001. So it's very intense. We have a supervisor dedicated every day to monitoring real-time passenger information on every bus, and that person stays in constant communication with the bus operators for every scheduled trip to find out if what the supervisor is seeing on the screen with respect to ridership is consistent with what the bus operator is seeing. And then as that bus is approaching capacity, then they're trying to deploy the backup buses if they have them available. But there's a limited supply of backup buses, and I think we're probably backing up somewhere in the neighborhood to 40, somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 50 trips per day. And in some cases, having to leave passengers waiting at the stop, maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 or 5 times a day on average, affecting maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 passengers per day. We're doing the best that we can. We're working really hard. Our frontline bus operators, mechanics, facilities maintenance people deserve a tremendous amount of credit for their courage and dedication. And, we've done what we could and done quite a bit to try to safeguard their health. And so far, I think, compared to where we were back in the middle of March, when we had about 38 people out because they were either experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 or had been exposed to somebody who was experiencing symptoms. We're now looking at having maybe 2 people out that were potentially exposed, and they're in self-quarantine for 14 days. As far as the Maroon Bell service is concerned, Marky, that is going really very well. Originally we were planning on implementing the reservation system pre-COVID-19 in September, when we hit the peak leaf peeping part of the season. And RAFTA was concerned about how that was going to work. It was going to be a big departure of what we've traditionally done. Last year we had days where we transported more than 3,000 passengers on a Saturday or a Sunday from Highlands up to the Bells, and then 3,000 back down, which rivals the amount of ridership that we have in the peak winter season between Aspen and Snowmass when we're running all the skier shuttles. We partnered with H2O Ventures, which is the same company that managed the Hanging Lake shuttle last year successfully. They're not operating the shuttle this year, but they are managing a parking reservation system for Hanging Lake, which is working well. And they're also, in addition to managing the reservation system for the Maroon Bell system, managing the reservation system for parking up at the Bells in cooperation with Forest Service. We have 29 scheduled trips per day from 8 a.m. till 3 p.m. We are transporting a maximum number of 15 passengers per bus trip. Everybody's required to wear a face covering. That gives us 435 seats available per day. We're experiencing somewhere in the neighborhood of, on average, maybe 40 to 50 no-shows per day. We are selling tickets to people who are walking in. So on average, we are selling about 475 tickets per day for 435 seats that are available. And because of that, and because every day that's been the case, and we are transporting about 420 people per day, it looks like we have a good shot at bringing the service in this year with a subsidy that might be in the range of about 12% or 13%. The board had given that as a requirement for running the service this year, that we try to keep it at 10%, but we've had to add in some buses in the afternoon to provide some more capacity to get people off the mountain in a timely fashion. And from everything that I know, H2O Ventures has been doing an incredible job, because they're also under contract with us to host a welcome center at Highlands where they're checking people in. They're able to determine how many people haven't shown, how many tickets more they can sell to standby people, and so forth. That's all working very well. Our personnel are doing an incredible job, our supervisors and so forth, and so it's running very smoothly.
Well, thank you very much. Tori, does that answer your question? And I know that many of you may not sit on the RAFTA board, but you're always welcome to listen into the board meetings. They're very interesting. And if you have questions for Dan, can you please shoot it to him? He and his staff are working around the clock trying to keep this all smooth. So do I see any other hands go up? Did you want to talk about the work plan at all, or are you fine?
I think I'm all set.
Okay. Any other issue people would like to bring forth? Any other questions? Well, then, guess what? We're done. Steve, is this a bye-bye? Bye-bye now?
No, this is a question for Dan, actually. If I'm curious, if everyone is really good and wears their masks on the bus, has their hands disinfected before they get on the bus, how many people could you safely carry on the buses? Is it possible to increase the capacity of the buses anytime soon, or is it premature to think about doing that?
I think right now it's probably a little bit premature, Steve. We're in constant communication with Pitkin County health officials. Every time we have reduced service or increased service or changed the capacity on a bus, we have vetted it with them and also with Garfield County Health Department. It's kind of a moving target in the transit industry in terms of what's acceptable to allow for social distancing on buses. Many transit systems on a low floor bus like RAFTA's have a maximum of 15 passengers. Some go with 50% of capacity. On a larger bus like Mustang, for example, which has somewhere in the neighborhood of 55 seats, they are allowing up to 22 passengers. The Denver RTD, I believe, is allowing 20 passengers on those buses. And even if we could go up that high on those over-the-road coaches, it would probably eliminate the need to back up, 10 to 15 of the buses that we're backing up right now, because sometimes we're just going over that 15 number and we have to burn a bus for 2 or 3 people. But we're looking at everything that we can do. We have viricide that we treat the buses with every night to kill the virus. We're looking at our air handling systems. We've done seating layouts, especially for the larger buses, that would allow us to go up to 20 passengers or 25 passengers. But until we get an indication that that would be acceptable from our local health officials. We're going to kind of stand pat, especially as we're seeing a spike in the numbers of people contracting coronavirus. We don't feel like right now is the best time to ask to, to put more people on the buses. We feel really good that we're able to operate the shuttle service to the Moon Bells during the pandemic using a brand new reservation system for RAFTA, which seemed to be working really well. So we don't want to push our luck.
Thank you for that answer.
Okay, thank you, Matt.
Do we have
Appreciate
any other?
your answer on that.
Yeah, we're a little premature because our hospital is in a cautious state, and Garfield has had a tremendous spike, and so has Eagle County. So we just need to pedal to the metal and wear your mask. Okay, do I have a motion for adjournment?
I will motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Bill. Do I have a second? I saw Bob Circus's hand go up. Thank you, Bob. All in support, raise your hand. Boy, what an early evening, 5 o'clock. David, this is all due to your great preparation. You are phenomenal.